Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Blackout Girl, tracing my scars from addiction and sexual assault, with new and updated content for the Me Too era, by Jennifer Storm, narrated by Jennifer Storm. This book is dedicated to my father, James K. Storm Sr., for his unconditional love, support, humor, and constant presence in my life. To the alcoholic or addict who is still sick and suffering, may this book read as a guide to recovery from whatever you are going through. To the survivor who has yet to find your voice and is still living in silence, you are not alone. May you find hope in these pages. Forward. When I first read Blackout Girl, I put it down and wept. Jennifer Storm has bared her soul in this book in order to help others heal. She recounts experiencing rape as a child, suicide attempts, addiction, an eating disorder, and 36 jobs in 10 years. Jennifer's story is her own, but it echoes the stories of countless survivors of sexual violence and other forms of trauma who turn to substances to numb the pain and filter out their feelings. I first met Jennifer in 2018 on the steps of the Montgomery County Courthouse at the start of the sentencing for Bill Cosby. I attended the Cosby trials as a survivor advocate, providing support and protection for the women he abused. I was huddled in the cold with a group of Cosby survivors waiting to get into the courthouse. Jennifer approached us with effusive confidence, introduced herself, and immediately escorted us into the warm building. She made it clear that she had their backs. Over the course of the next few days, I witnessed her expert skills and love in action, hugging survivors who were triggered by being in the courtroom with Cosby, providing immediate assistance to a survivor who was experiencing a dissociative episode. During those intense days in the courtroom, Jennifer revealed herself as a fearless warrior and protector, ready to do battle for us. Her steely presence reduced the pain of the women who had sat through 2 trials and were finally seeing some justice. As a public survivor and survivor advocate, I know firsthand the importance of Jennifer's work in both legal settings and support groups. She is saving lives by being a rock for people who have lost all hope after suffering trauma. But Jennifer is rare among survivor advocates when it comes to her brilliant legal mind, her fierce dedication to justice, and the sheer size of her heart. Jennifer's compassion for survivors and passion for justice are palpable, and those around her are drawn to her authentic way of being in the world. Blackout Girl is a must-read for folks struggling from trauma, addiction, or both. While most of us are walking wounded, carrying invisible scars of trauma, this book is a strong reminder that we are not alone, and healing is possible. Jennifer was set free the moment she realized my secrets kept me sick. Jennifer's story in Blackout Girl is personal to me. I grew up in a large family with 5 siblings, extreme poverty, and sexual violence. Most of my siblings struggle with addiction issues from the trauma. I lost my brother Christian to a heroin overdose last year. Jennifer's story is his story. It is also my sister Kathleen's story, who is thankfully still alive and, like Jennifer, uses her pain to help others heal. Blackout Girl should be required reading for addiction professionals because it expertly draws life-saving connections between trauma and addiction. Jennifer weaves research in with her personal story in ways that bring this connection to life for those who are suffering and advocating for people suffering with addiction. Survivor-informed interventions are simply more effective, and Blackout Girl is an excellent resource for understanding how trauma and addiction are entwined. Jennifer's insights about how humans react to trauma will be useful for law enforcement and legal professionals who want to better understand why sexual assault survivors typically have memory issues. She explains, when you are traumatized, it affects every part of you, your brain, your nervous system, your soul, your spirit, your smile. You often cannot recall the big picture. You can only focus for hours on one small, insignificant detail. You can recall a smell, but not the source of the smell. Having such fractured memories is an odd experience and makes it extremely difficult to explain it all to someone because you know it sounds irrational. Even to this day, I'm not always comfortable explaining my assaults to people. Even though the majority of my memory is put back together, there are still pieces missing. Since Jennifer first published Blackout Girl in 2008, the Me Too movement has dramatically shifted national consciousness about sexual violence. The movement raised awareness of the prevalence of the problem, and survivors are more likely to be believed if they come forward today. Jennifer's story, Blackout Girl, is more relevant now than ever because her experiences and expertise in this latest edition come at a time when many people are looking for support and hope, and the knowledge that they are not alone. But there's a lot of work yet to be done to reduce the stigma aimed at sexual assault survivors. While Cosby was convicted, the vast majority of sexual predators are not. As Jennifer notes, a predator sexually assaults someone every 73 seconds in the United States. But due to victim blaming, rape myths, and a broken legal system, less than 1% of rapists will ever see a day inside a jail cell. Rape is the only crime where we routinely put the victim's character on trial. And despite the evidence, juries steeped in rape myths that blame and shame survivors are unlikely to reach a guilty verdict, so these cases rarely make it that far. There's also persistent victim-blaming stigma against those suffering from addiction. In 2018, nearly 70,000 people died from drug overdoses in the United States, and many Americans still view drug addiction as a moral failing rather than a disease. If our society truly understood the connection between trauma, victimization, and addiction, we would immediately stop blaming people suffering from addiction. We have a lot of work to do to achieve widespread adoption of survivor-based, trauma-informed intervention, but Blackout Girl provides a blueprint for getting there. Jennifer's incredible vulnerability as a survivor and insight as an expert give me great hope that we can fight that better world, one story of survivorship and sobriety at a time. Carol Heldman, Ph.D., Executive Director of the Representation Project and Vice President of Research and Insights at the Gina Davis Institute on Gender and Media. Preface. I am absolutely thrilled that this book is getting another launch into the universe. I wrote my story very long ago, and in doing so, exposed my deepest and darkest experiences with the world. I initially began writing as a means of healing. Writing is what helped me process my feelings and emotions when I could not open my mouth and speak them, or when I did not trust people enough to hold them sacred. Obviously, a lot has changed since then. I'm now entrusting the world with it in all of the hopes that one or more of you finds yourself in these pages. At this moment in our society, the disclosures of sexual violence, trespass, invasion, and abuse are swirling all around us. On one hand, it's empowering and exhilarating. We are not alone. On the other hand, we're ripping open wounds that people have tried to secure for years. You cannot escape the topic. It no longer lives in the silent shadows of our minds. It's all over our Twitter and Facebook feeds and the 24-hour news cycle, and we are having to face the fact that many previously loved and respected political leaders, entertainers, and other public figures are not who we thought they were. Other people are finally talking about the ways our American culture conceals and even encourages sexual abuse and harassment. Others are starting to see what we have known for a long time. It is triggering, it is scary, and for some, it's become deadly. Suicide rates increased by 33% from 1999 through 2017, according to the CDC's National Center for Health Statistics. Addiction and death by overdose are ravaging our human race. From 2016 to 2017, the rate of drug overdose deaths in the United States increased by 9.6%. There were 35,823 alcohol-induced deaths, not including accidents or homicides, in 2017 alone. We cannot act like these things are not connected. People are hurting. Our system is not fully developed to heal the wounds left by sexual violence in the way we require. So as a society, we self-medicate. We pick up the first drink, and then another, and another, until our wounds feel like a distant memory, and fake smiles and hollow laughter allow us to manage another day. We stick needles in our arms full of who knows what, because we cannot stand to be in our actual skin. We are killing ourselves over untreated trauma. Blackout Girl was published in 2008 at a time when it was much more rare and even more stigmatized to speak openly about our experiences with sexual violence. In many ways, this book actually feels more relevant today than back then. Every single time I speak publicly, a survivor, or two, or three, or four approach me afterwards to share their own story. Oftentimes, they tell me I was the first person they had ever told. Personal healing starts when we feel connected to one another, when we feel less alone, and we know that our experiences, while horrific and deeply personal, are shared. While I speak, I try to search people's faces and eyes in the crowd. I watch for their reactions, their quiet nods of agreement, the utter shock in their expressions, the held-back tears floating at the rims of their eyes, and the occasional full-on sobs. I can often tell who's going to line up to talk to me before they even do it. Sometimes it's an immediate rush of folks with kind words, similar family stories and histories, questions, etc. Then there are the lingerers, the ones who wait out the crowd and stand quietly off to the side. I try to make sure I spot them and provide them with the space they need to talk. I never take for granted how incredibly brave and courageous it is for someone to approach a stranger and disclose what is often the absolute worst experience they have ever had. I thank each and every one of you amazing warriors for doing so. I know you think I helped you, and for that I am deeply grateful, but I'm here to tell you that every time you shared your pain, you saved me, over and over again. You strengthened my resolve to continue this work, to never stop fighting for justice for all survivors and for spaces that are safe to expose and heal. It is in deep appreciation and dedication to you that this book gets to continue to live. When I was first approached with the idea of titling this book Blackout Girl, I have to admit, I was a little offended. I haven't blacked out in decades, so why should I identify myself that way? As a teen and a young adult, though, I blacked out all the time. I was the Blackout Girl, the one at every party who drank too much, never knew how to say no, called you the next day asking you to tell me what happened the night before. I awoke many times to thoughts of, where the hell am I? How did I get here? And where's my car? But what is a blackout anyway? There are many common misperceptions about what it means, so I want to define blackout in my own terms for you. Many people think blacking out and passing out are interchangeable terms. They are not. Passing out is something you do when you are extremely tired and your body just gives out and you fall asleep, or when you have drunk so much, taken so many pills, or done so many drugs that you pass out from them, passing out being a sleeping state. Blacking out is totally different. Blacking out occurs when you lose conscious thought, control over motion and time. Blacking out usually occurs when a person drinks way too much, is deeply traumatized, or has some medical condition. Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary, the 11th edition, defines the verb black out in several ways, but these two I feel are the most applicable definitions. To become enveloped in darkness, or to undergo a temporary loss of vision, consciousness, or memory. The vast difference is that when people are in a blackout, they can very well be wide awake. He can be talking, granted, sometimes slurring, and not making much sense, but talking nonetheless. She can be moving, driving, dancing. The person can be in motion of some kind, but without the cognitive reasoning behind the actions or the ability to control them. And in many cases, that person cannot and will not remember any of it afterward. A blackout may also involve totally losing consciousness. I have had varying experiences, but regardless of how they took form, whether I was out cold and motionless or wild in motion, they were all blackouts. I should know because I've had many. My first blackout came the first time I drank. I drank a lot, too much, and I blacked out, leaving me with a very dark, empty space in my mind where the memory should have been. Other times, I would be left with bits and pieces of a memory. It was like a film playing in my head that felt sort of familiar, as though maybe I had seen it before, but some of the scenes had been switched around or edited out altogether. Or you might say it's like opening an old jigsaw puzzle, dumping the contents on the table, and finding that there are only 5 pieces of a 100-piece puzzle. And when you check the front of the box to see what the picture's supposed to be, it's too worn out to make out. To this day, I still have many memories that are shattered, with pieces lying throughout my past, whether in other memories or buried deep within myself. I'm still trying to fit some of those pieces into place. Many are lost, and I will never have complete pictures or full recollections of some of the events in my past. You will not read any lengthy conversations in this book because there's no way for me to recall that level of detail for the past experiences I had when I was under the influence. Because I wanted this book to be as rigorously honest as possible, certain details aren't here simply because of the blackout factor. Everything you read in the following pages is true to the best of my recollection and perception of events in my life, without exaggeration or embellishment. I have changed many names to protect those who have crossed my path. However, I have not altered the facts I know in any way. This recollection of my story includes pieces that many may find difficult to read. I talk about rape, self-harm, suicide, and emotional abuse, among other sensitive subjects, because those topics are all very relevant to my life. When I talk to people with similar experiences who have read the first edition of this book, they often thank me for the honest descriptions of these events. Sometimes they have never heard anyone talk about these things firsthand, and the knowledge that another person went through the same thing and came out the other side is very healing. However, I know that others may not be in the same place. For some readers with personal experience in these areas, this book may be difficult to get through. It may trigger thoughts and emotions from your past that you are not ready to tackle. If you feel emotionally triggered or overwhelmed while reading, I encourage you to take a break and talk about your feelings with a trusted friend or therapist. If you don't think you're in a good space to read this right now, believe me, I get that. Above all, my message to each and every one of you is to take care of yourself. You're not alone. This is my life as I have experienced and remember it. To put it mildly, I've lived a very colorful life in my 40-some years on the planet. I feel blessed for all I have seen and grateful to be alive to tell my stories. Writing this book has helped me collect a couple of those missing pieces, and I am thankful to be in a position to share them with you. If you are having thoughts of suicide, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255 or connect with someone on the crisis text line by texting HOME to 741-741. If you have been raped or sexually abused and need help, call RAIN's National Sexual Assault Hotline at 1-800-656-4673. Chapter 1. Tracing Scars. I have a scar directly under my chin that I got when I was a young child. My brother Brian and I were playing horsey around the large wooden coffee table in our living room. Brian thought it would be funny to push me as I was rounding the table, and my chin smashed right into its sharp corner. A couple of years later, that same brother thought it would be even funnier to see what a sparkler looked like directly on my right arm, producing a very large scar near the bend at my elbow. But the worst scars are the ones that came from my own decisions. I have made many bad decisions in my life. The scar on my left knee came from practicing my back dive on the side of the pool one time, curving all the way over to the left and sliding down along the pool's concrete side into the water, scraping the skin off my knee. Ouch. Then there is the tiny scar between my eyes caused by a nasty girl at a dance club one night. She apparently didn't appreciate the fact that I was drunk and making out with her boyfriend, so she smashed a 16-ounce glass into my face. Finally, there are the scars on my wrists. These are probably the most painful scars I have. They are deep and violently race across both wrists like a road map of hopelessness. One day, in 1997, I woke up in a psychiatric ward of St. Luke's Hospital with 3 doctors standing over me, my wrists tightly wrapped in bright white gauze, with a splint on the right hand to hold my wrist and my hand together. Hours before, I had wanted to die. But when I woke up, I made the decision to live. And that was more than 2 decades ago now. In 2019, I woke up knowing that, in a few hours, the sensitive skin on my wrist would be subjected to a different kind of treatment. I was going to get a tattoo. Another person, a stranger, would be touching that skin with another very different, sharp object and leaving another, very different yet permanent mark. I was scared. I was keenly aware that when we experience trauma, our bodies hold memories. The soft tissue that grew to heal the damage that I had done to create the scars has a memory. It stores the pain. And though that protective skin has grown, just underneath the surface, those wounds remain. Those many years ago, I was a person who used razors on my skin as a means to cope with pain, and I was petrified of what it would feel like to have that area of my skin penetrated again. However, waking up that morning, I reminded myself that this time would be very different. I was not attempting to inflict pain anymore. I was not attempting to conceal or deal by hurting myself. Those days are long gone for me. This time, by getting a tattoo, I would be reclaiming my skin, taking back some past decisions and redefining them. Redefining the way I see them and the way the world sees them. I'm not covering up my scars with this tattoo. Rather, I'm giving them a new meaning. If anything, by getting the tattoo, I am drawing more attention to my scars, and I'm happy to do so. I am proud of my story. I'm proud of how far I have come. I've always used my story as a means to help others. This new tattoo will give me another means by which to do just that. When people see my tattoo, they will ask about it, and it will give me another opportunity to highlight hope, recovery, and resilience. My life is now full of that hope and recovery. full of healthy, happy relationships and so many blessings. But the story of how I got there starts much earlier, and in a much darker and more violent place. Chapter 2. First beer, first blackout. The hours are a complete blur of broken memories, out of order, improperly sequenced, totally fucked up events. I was 12 and had just drunk my first beer. Well, first several beers. The next clear thing I can remember is being outside on a hill, completely naked, with this man Lee on top of me trying to shove his penis into my small, unwilling vagina. It was like passing out at point B and fast-forwarding to whatever comes after point Z. He kept saying, "I can't get it in," and I remember asking, as if this was suddenly important, "Am I still a virgin?" The next thing I remember is pushing him off me and running naked to the car, which was parked up on a hill. At the time, it seemed about 1,000 miles away. I wasn't sure where the hell I was, or what time it was, or what had just happened, or where anybody else was, or why we were here in the first place. I just knew that I wanted to leave. My head was spinning out of control, and I kept blinking in and out of the world around me. I jumped into the driver's seat and tried to start the car up the way I had watched my father do so many times before. It started, and I managed to find the lights. I had never driven, and I didn't know where the hell I was going. The car had a stick shift, and I had no idea what to do with it. I began jiggling the stick shift fiercely, but nothing happened. Nothing, that is, but a lot of horrible sounds from the engine. I was still naked and scared, and didn't know what was going on. I didn't know how I got there, and a million questions pulsed through my aching head. The top 3 being, how long have I been here? 2, why am I naked? 3, where the fuck am I? Instead of answers, suddenly Lisa, her boyfriend, and Lee were running to the car, and then everything went black again. My father used to tell me all the time that Skate Escape roller rink, which was in Wing Gap, Pennsylvania, about 15 miles away from my family's new house, was a bad place. If I kept going there, he warned, something bad would likely happen to me. It was cryptic, but he had this way of predicting the future, and it always pissed me off. But 9 times out of 10, he was actually right. He always said this to me, but of course, when I asked to go, he always gave in and let me, even though his gut must have been screaming out against it. I was 12 and had been going to the skating rink for a while, hanging out with older kids every weekend. One girl in particular, Lisa, was 16 and had become one of my closest friends there. We spoke on the phone all the time and saw each other every weekend. I never thought it was strange that she was so much older than I was, and that, while she had a car, I hadn't even really gotten my period yet. We had gotten along really well. I was always way beyond my years and usually had trouble relating to people my own age. I'm not sure why this is. Maybe I was born an old soul, as some would tell me later in life. When I think back now, 12 is such a young, tender age. But at the time, I felt so old, so mature, so over Barbie dolls and braids. On this particular weekend, Lisa called to see if I would like to go roller skating with her boyfriend, and his friend. I knew her boyfriend was much older, like in his 20s, and I was nervous about this, but also excited. I'd never met her boyfriend or his friend. I felt an anxiety in the pit of my stomach that I had never experienced. It engulfed me, and I could barely speak. It was like a wave of excitement and fear rippling through my entire body. I knew my parents wouldn't let me go if I told the truth, because they always drove me to the roller rink and picked me up. I had never been allowed to go anywhere in a car with a friend who drove, especially not a friend with a boyfriend. So I did what many kids do, and do well. I lied to my parents for the first time. I began begging my parents earlier in the day. My mother and I had gone to the hairdresser earlier to get haircuts, and I was driving her crazy the whole time. I kept telling her what a great person Lisa was, and that she would just be picking me up and taking me to the rink and then bringing me home at 10 o'clock that night. All the while, I was making sure to complain loudly enough to get the attention of my mother's stylist, so she would agree with me and help me convince my mother to let me go. I had learned by this point, or perhaps kids are just born with this ability, that the best way to make your parents cave in is by nagging one of them to the brink of insanity. Then eventually, that parent shoves the responsibility onto the other parent. Mom was the gatekeeper. Once I got past her, my father was easy. After all, I was his baby girl, and he rarely said no to me. All I had to do was crawl up into his lap, flash my baby blues his way, and ask in my sweetest voice, "Please." He would melt, and that would be the end of that. So I just needed to hear those magic words, "I don't care as long as your father says yes." By the time I was done with her at the salon, she cracked and said yes. I went home with victory in hand. I immediately called Lisa and told her that I was almost there and would call her back after I spoke with my father. I then proceeded to work on him, and after not too much of an argument, he too said yes. Times were different in the 1980s. We didn't have the internet. We didn't hear about child abuse and sexual predators as commonly as we do today. There was still a general false sense of safety that surrounded communities, especially suburban communities. So while I look back on this today and wonder how the hell my parents let me go with total strangers that they had never met, I have to remember that things were different then. I arranged to have Lisa meet me at the entrance of our trailer park, far away from my actual home. When my parents raised a collective eyebrow, I told them that this was so that she wouldn't get lost finding our house. It's true that our home was a bit hard to find, but really, I knew she was coming with her boyfriend and his friend Lee, and I could not let my parents see guys in the car. I vividly remember my parents not giving me any resistance on this issue, and as I kissed them both goodnight and walked out the door, I knew deep down something was strange. I felt weird in the pit of my stomach, all queasy and sick-like. The closer I got to the entrance of the park, the more I wanted to turn back, run home, and jump into my daddy's lap. But something compelled me to go, and to this day I still don't know what that was. When I reached the entrance, the car was already waiting for me. Lisa's boyfriend was driving, and she was in the front seat. She opened the door, and I climbed into the back seat to find an older man sitting there next to a cooler. He wasn't the boy I envisioned seeing. He looked very rugged and mature. I would find out later that he was, in fact, in his 20s. I had taken special care getting ready that night because I had no idea what to expect. I pulled on my favorite big, baggy yellow rugby shirt with swatch in bold red lettering across the chest and my dark blue Levi's jeans with the thick seam down the middle that curved around the back of my calf. With minimal makeup and hair done to perfection, my body was just south of ripeness, and there was no way I looked 15, which is the age Lisa told the man in the back seat. I went along with the lie, 15, and never asked how old he was. I just assumed he was around 18. It seemed so old to me, but whatever. We were just going skating, and as I told myself, nothing major was going to happen. After driving about 10 miles, we turned off way before the skating rink. When I inquired where we were going, they said, "We're going to go hang out and drink a little before we went skating." Sure, I remember thinking to myself, cool, whatever. I was exhilarated and scared at the same time. Except for the occasional sips I stole from the grasshoppers my mother drank at the holidays, I had never really drunk alcohol before. We stopped at a clearing by a river and got out of the car. Lee grabbed the cooler with confidence and brought it outside with us. I followed Lisa over to a large rock where we both sat down. The guys dropped down beside us, each with two 16-ounce bush pounders in their hands. Just like that, Lee handed me a beer. No drum roll, no diploma, do not pass go, just go straight to adulthood. I had never held a beer in my life, let alone this big, long can that I could barely fit my 12-year-old hand around. Did Lee notice, or just not care? I remember how cold it felt and the moisture dripping down the side glistening in a very inviting way. I just looked at it for a while and watched as the others began to drink. Finally, I tilted the can to my mouth and felt the cold rush of foam and bitter liquid as it hit my tongue and streamed down my throat. I just kept tilting the can back, farther and farther. I enjoyed the almost immediate rush that went through my temples and up to the top of my scalp. Instantly, my head began to feel light, and it was hard to focus. I loved this feeling. It was immediate and all right with me. I was giddy and began laughing, at nothing at all, for no reason at all. No one noticed, or, if they noticed, cared. I had slipped, unseen and undiscovered, into the land of adults. If I didn't actually belong there, I must not have stood out too much either. We were all just hanging out and talking, drinking, and laughing. It felt very harmless, and I was thirsty, thirstier than I could ever remember being before. I kept drinking one tall boy after another until I had to pee so badly I couldn't hold it anymore. I told Lisa, and she was all like, "Well, we're going to have to go in the bushes since there are no bathrooms." Yippee! Another rite of passage. This was my first outdoor urination, and I was laughing the whole time as we both pulled our pants down and almost fell on top of each other. I never had to pee so badly in all my life. When it finally came and began to flow between my legs onto the ground, I felt a release that was amazing, better than anything I had ever felt. Like a current, it sent electricity through my body as the little puddle began to splash up onto my shoe. I thought that was gross, and we just both laughed about it. Between giggling bouts, Lisa joked about how Lee liked me and asked if I thought he was cute. I was snorting, my head was spinning, and I couldn't form a complete thought, but I told her, "I think he's cute, I guess." We went back to where the guys were sitting, and it was clear from the way they zipped it that they had been discussing the same thing. We sat there for a long time, just drinking and talking and drinking. I don't remember about what exactly. I just remember I kept drinking, and it began to get dark. The last thing I remember consciously was thinking, are we ever going roller skating? The car door opened and I was leaning out from the back seat into the brisk.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?